if you're, 2 years from writing your essay, as in like from applying, but you have like the flexibility now to take the GMAT, it
Book
does
the
last for
damn
5 years.
test.
Yeah.
That's
Book
the
it now.
message. Book the damn test. Hello, everyone. This is How Did You Get In? A conversational podcast with people who got into the world's top business schools. We'll be talking with these applicants, hearing about their tips, tricks, and secrets to success. We welcome you to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to How Did You Get In? Today, we have a very, very special guest. You might recognize her voice. She is the lovely co-host, Alex Neuber. Alex, say hello.
Hi, everyone.
We're so excited to have you. And I personally love any chance I get to talk to Alex. She was one of my section mates at Harvard Business School. One of the first people I made friends with, and have just so many good memories and so much dirt on this girl. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit about how she prepped, and before I knew her, how she thought about what she wanted to do with her life and getting into school. And maybe before we start with the business school, the big business school questions of how did you prep? How did you get in? How did you get into this? How did you get into wanting to do this podcast? Because I think this is partially your brainchild.
Yeah, I mean, I think the application process for business school was one of the most stressful periods of my life, other than planning my wedding.
But she just got married.
Yeah, exactly. I just got married. So at the time, it was the most stressful time of my life. It doesn't help that I was also at work. It was also a stressful period at work. So it was just like the combination of both. And I felt like it was a pretty lonely process a lot of the time. Yes, I had friends going through it, but at the end of the day, it's such a process of just looking inward and like trying to, come up with your story. And then you start comparing yourself, and it's just, or when you start going down the comparison route, you start to doubt yourself. And that just is like a very lonely death spiral, basically. And so the more help that in retrospect, I would have wanted more help than I did have. And so I think this podcast, as well as, the other resources we provide, is a way to lend a helping hand to those going through something similar.
Amazing. And if I remember correctly, you have the stressful process, but you also had some decently big shoes to fill. Your family is all sort of taken pretty career heavy paths. And so you're trying to figure out what your place is. Tell us a little bit about, you've got two siblings, the example they set, and how that factored into this process.
Yeah. So I'm the youngest of three, and my siblings before me have done very well career-wise. My brother did the iBanking route, then private equity, and now is working in Bermuda, and is
Bermuda.
Yeah, nice life, and is second to the CFO at a massive reinsurance company down there. And he's actually at Wharton right now doing their executive program. My sister, she out of school did the GE FMP program, which is, I think, the oldest financial training program in the country. And then did management consulting, and she went to MIT Sloan. And so again, it was, my siblings were crushing it. And so I was trying to also crush it career-wise, live up to the, precedent that was set. And I also, I'd wanted to go to business school starting in undergrad. When I was a sophomore in college, I went to the Women in Business conference that HBS hosted. And I remember calling my mom on the way home, telling her, like, I need to go here someday. So I for sure had my sights set on business school, even before, knowing my sister was going to go to MIT. It was particularly like an entrepreneurship panel during that conference that I was like, oh yeah, I want to like go to HBS and like one day start my own company. That was like what I had in mind. And that's the way that I will my brother can set a legacy in finance. I can set a legacy in entrepreneurship, maybe.
That's awesome. No, and you absolutely will. And it's funny, you're talking about that moment where you felt like this is what I want to do. And I had my own moment, and I'll talk about it in some future episode. But I also had a moment, I wonder if you had this at all when you were on campus or before applying, where I looked around and I remember seeing there's just all of these very well manicured, beautiful women in like different colored blazers. Like it was a uniform of like pastel and bold colored blazers with the jeans where it's like, you're trying to look professional, but not too professional. And I remember just looking and thinking like, oh God, this is never going to happen for me. I don't know if you had any moments like that of looking around and kind of imposter syndrome.
Oh, for sure. And especially at that conference, all the women on the panel, I was like, wow, they're so cool. And like, I can't wait until I'm them.
And now Alex will be on one of those panels, I'm sure, shortly in the next few years. And we'll get into more of what she's doing right now, but she's like, I'm inspired because she's definitely someone who like went in with a vision of what she wanted to do, developed it further at school, explored it, and is now actually pursuing it, which is awesome. So with that, I'd love to hear a little bit more. Tell the audience more about your background before HBS. Where did you go to college? What did you study? What were you like as a high schooler?
Yeah. So I'm originally from upstate New York, Clifton Park, which is in between Albany and Saratoga. I was very focused on school as well. And I was the valedictorian of my high school. So that for sure helped in terms of all the application process. But I was just so focused on college for a very long time. I think I started college visits in my sophomore year of high school.
Jesus H Christ.
I know, right?
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Such a nerd. It helped that I was going on college tours with my sister too. So I was like, oh yeah, let me keep this in mind for what I want as well. Funny enough, when I went to visit Cornell, it was the only one my parents didn't go with me. And I came back and I was like, yeah, I'm going to apply to Cornell early decision. I really liked my tour guide. And he was saying that he was in the business major at Cornell. And I was like, oh yeah, I feel like I should do business. And so at Cornell, the business major is applied economics and management. We call it AIM. At the time, instant messenger was still a thing. So I was kind of confused why everyone was talking about AIM. So I applied to the AIM program specifically, or the Dyson School as now called. Went early action, early decision. And then when I got there, I was so glad I chose the business program, really liked my professors, what I was learning. And then sophomore year, which you'll hear more about in my essay, I had to get my gallbladder removed. And coming out of it, it was just a long process of like trying to feel better and get back to normal. And meanwhile, I happened to be at one of the like most agricultural focused schools in the US, or at least like in the Northeast. And so I started taking some of the food industry classes in addition to my the rest of my business classes, and then ended up loving the professors, did like a food marketing fellow program on campus, went to the produce marketing show out in Anaheim, California as as part of the student program, did a lot of stuff in food, did my summer internship sophomore year in Bentonville, Arkansas at Walmart headquarters, working on the coffee, pasta, and breakfast cereal division within Sam's Club.
Very nice. Very nice. You got to meet a celebrity there, if I remember
correctly.
Yeah,
I got to meet Fergie. Still have a picture of her.
Fergalicious.
And also, it was the 50th anniversary of Walmart, and so every year they do a huge like shareholders meeting, and they went all out. Like they got Celine Dion, Taylor Swift, Lionel Richie, and Zach Brown Band to perform.
Damn. Highlight of the summer.
They have a great intern program. They for sure spoiled their interns. It was really fun. And then the next summer went to Unilever and worked on Country Crock margarine. So margarine, the sexiest of businesses.
Can't believe it's not Butter's other step cousin.
Yeah, exactly. It had been declining relative to butter for like the last 10 years. So yeah, you could tell that people, I mean, the reason I didn't go back to Unilever was like, you could tell the people on the team, like they all wanted to be working on like Dove and Axe within Unilever, which is understandable. Those are like the sexy brands that are actually growing. And I could tell that Unilever was going to continue deprioritizing their food business other than Hellmann's mayonnaise, which is their cash cow. And sure enough, I was right. They ended up selling off like the margarine business like a couple years after that.
Oh, she's so smart.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was like senior year, I was kind of torn between like, okay, should I try to find something that's definitely food, or should I, take a risk more and like go with a company that's like, I knew coming out of the Unilever experience, I didn't want to work on something that had been declining for 10 years. Like I needed to be at a high growth company. I also knew I needed, or like so much of your day to day is based on the people that you work with. And so again, in like, I could tell that this team was like, this was just a stepping stone.
They were checked out.
Yeah. Not checked out. They're, as in like, they were very like, successful workers, but it was more like, I'm going to work hard so that I can leave food. And so, yeah, I wanted a place where like people seemed to be happy to work there. And so actually like just applied to a bunch of companies, including Wayfair, which was based out of Boston, and loved the people. Like my super day, I just remember like, wow. And every person that interviewed me that day, I would like want to hang out with, and they just seemed to love what they were doing. And Wayfair was a rocket ship then, and it was for the 5 years that I was there. So I did growth marketing for Wayfair, and my last 2 years there was part of the founding team of Paragold.com, which was the Wayfair luxury brand. And that was a super cool experience. It felt like working on a startup within a bigger company, which was like a good testing grounds to see if, entrepreneurship or like earlier stage companies was where I wanted to be, which it for sure was. And so that long way of getting there, but that's what, I mean, again, I always knew I wanted to go, but to business school, but was like, okay, yes, this reaffirms like, I want to pursue something entrepreneurial. I want to ideally get back into the food industry if I can. And business school seemed like a good way. Of course, I will caveat this. You do not need business school to start your own company.
Nope.
But I do think starting your own company is a combination of like hustle and who you know. And the who you know part is what I was trying to get with business school.
That's smart. That makes a ton of sense. You started to talk about your journey towards understanding your interest in food. It might be a good time to jump to your essay, actually, and hear a little bit more about it. I loved hearing your essay, and I'm sure the audience will too. So whenever you're ready, if you want to read your essay out loud.
Yes, it's like going into a 3-4 year time capsule. All right. So, you're not the typical fair, fat, and 40, said the nurse, wheeling me into my gallbladder removal surgery. I didn't dwell on the comment in the moment, my hypochondriac mind too preoccupied convincing myself I wouldn't wake up from the anesthesia. It wasn't until I was recovering at home that I even remembered the nurse's remark. At only 19, my gallbladder had failed, an occurrence common for people in their 40s and 50s, but rare for a still teenager. Obsessed with getting to the root cause of all problems, I asked myself, why me? The first step in my 7-year journey to applying to business school. I started researching risk factors. Although genetics played a role, there's a number of emerging studies linking poor diet to gallbladder disease. While I'll never know if diet was a contributing factor in my case, I was alarmed to discover the breadth of research linking diet to a multitude of diseases, even cancer. It is a wake-up call for me. At the time, I was an unhealthy eater, frequently overindulging in sugary, highly processed food. I quickly became consumed with the desire to know more, not just about diet and disease, but everything about the food we eat, from how it's grown to what I should and shouldn't be eating. Trying to reconcile the conflicting facts and opinions available proved overwhelming, but there was one thing that almost every expert could agree on. vegetables are essential to a healthy preventative diet. With the optimistic enthusiasm I applied towards any new endeavor, I set out to eat more vegetables, but it was hard. Most vegetables were bland, expired quickly, and required at least some preparation. At the time, I was in a consumer behavior class at Cornell, learning about the challenges behind changing consumer habits. Despite a strong will to change, if the change isn't easy, no change will occur. The challenges we discussed in class were the same challenges I'd encountered trying to eat more vegetables, and I knew I wasn't the only one. A problem solver at heart, I realized my calling. I was going to figure out an easy, delicious way for people to eat more vegetables and thereby live healthier, longer lives. Still a sophomore at Cornell, I resolved to make the most of my remaining time by learning more about and getting involved in the food industry. I pivoted my studies to dual specialize in marketing and food industry management, applied for and was chosen to be a student representative at the Produce Marketing Association in Fresh Summit in California, completed an individual study on produce marketing, and joined a consulting club within the graduate business school where I led a project advising a local food startup. I sought out work experience in the industry as well, first relocating to Arkansas for a food merchandising internship at Sam's Club, and then to New Jersey for a food brand management internship at Unilever. All of these experiences were invaluable in teaching me the unique and challenging dynamics of the food industry. Suddenly, it was my senior year. I knew I eventually wanted to start my own venture in the food industry. The passion was there, and through my studies, internships, and experiences, I could hold my own in a conversation on food marketing. What I was lacking, however, was an entrepreneurial skill set developed through real work experience. I struggled with whether or not this experience needed to be within the food industry. The advice of one of my professors ultimately swayed me. He told me that the entrepreneurial skill set was transferable across industries and that I should choose a company that would develop that skill set the most. So rather than take my return offer with Unilever, a mature company with established processes for how things work, I sought out a company that was growing quickly, gave junior employees high levels of responsibility, and valued entrepreneurial thinking. My search led me to Wayfair and a role on the customer growth team. I made the most of my Wayfair opportunity by asking for projects and seeking out roles that were most entrepreneurial in nature. Despite already managing 2 marketing channels for Wayfair's All Modern brand, I asked my manager to take on more responsibility with direct mail, a brand new channel with a lot of growth potential. Within this role, I put together the business case to test a full-length print catalog and led the process from ideation to execution. Through this experience, I learned how to communicate a vision and convince senior leadership to not only sign on, but also increase headcount. After launching All Modern's print catalog program, I was eager for another entrepreneurial opportunity, so I asked to be a founding member of the customer growth team for Wayfair's newest lifestyle brand, Paragold. The task was daunting but exciting. Scale customer acquisition and take Paragold from a brand with only 2 customers and $3,000 in sales to what our CEO believes can be a $1 billion business. Through this Paragold experience, I learned how to look at a business holistically and prioritize numerous initiatives based on potential impact. I also learned how to advocate for resources, convincing managers on engineering, creative, and product teams to prioritize Paragold initiatives despite its small scale relative to other Wayfair brands. In my Wayfair roles, I learned to turn ideas into reality, but in a safe environment. If I failed, Wayfair Inc. would still prevail. I yearned for more. Wanting to understand what it's like to build something out of nothing, I signed up to be a host for YLAI, a program that matches entrepreneurs from Latin America with US companies for a 4-week-long learning exchange. I was matched with Viviana, the owner of a souvenir clothing business that features designs from Ecuadorian artists. Over the duration of Viviana's stay in the US, I learned the ins and outs of her business and helped her formulate expansion plans and solidify marketing strategy. Together, we also submitted a project proposal for a reverse exchange that would send me to Ecuador. Our proposal, organizing and executing a speed painting contest to discover new artists, was accepted, and I was able to travel to Guayaquil for a 2-week exchange this past summer. I learned a lot through the exchange, from the challenges Ecuadorian startups face to consumer attitudes towards e-commerce to, of course, the local food culture. One of the most important takeaways, however, was the necessity to adapt quickly and persevere through major setbacks. For example, a machine malfunctioned during the production of a new line, jeopardizing order fulfillment for Viviana's biggest retail account. Viviana had to rearrange her entire schedule to visit other facilities and negotiate last-minute contracts. She told me such setbacks were unfortunately frequent. You have to adapt quickly as there's no time to waste. Through my personal experiences and continued curiosity-fueled research, I've developed and continue to nurture a passion for the food industry and preventative nutrition. At Wayfair, I've learned how to lead cross-functional teams to turn ideas into reality in a resource-constrained environment, wearing many hats in the process of learning to think holistically about a business. I believe this skill set will serve me well in starting and managing my own business one day. However, there's always room for me to improve, which has led me to apply to Harvard Business School. I want to continue to develop my skill set and build upon my existing knowledge, from figuring out how to nail a sales pitch and secure funding to understanding how to scale an organization from both a people and resource perspective. I'm eager to learn from brilliant professors and classmates and take advantage of the multitude of resources the Rock Center has to offer. Finally, I'm confident I can contribute to the HBS community as well by sharing learnings from my hands-on experience, engaging in and initiating thought-provoking discussion, and hopefully one day becoming a successful entrepreneur who can mentor future students.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. I love everything about this essay, and I love hearing you read it, because I think the part that makes it so powerful and so good is, like, as your friend and as someone who knows you well, this is entirely authentic to who Alex is. There's nothing about that rings false, that rings like being showy or braggy. It is entirely like true to who you are, and you manage to talk about your accomplishments with clarity and like decisiveness, but humility. It's not boastful, but it's clear, and it's all in service of telling this story of like who you are and what you want to do. So that's like the first thing I love about it. What does it feel like having just read it out loud? Like, how do you feel?
I feel, I was almost like blushing, like, oh wow, like I forgot I did all this.
Yeah, you're a fucking badass. Excuse me, this is not going to be a PG podcast apparently, but you're a badass.
But no, it was good. And like, I think what's nice is like, for the most part, like I'm still on that path. So it's nice to look back and see, that, I've stayed true to like what I wanted.
And before, I want to hear, you mentioned and teased that like you're still following on that path that you started on with food, and I'm excited to hear more about it. But I also, I don't want to breeze past some of the elements of this essay that I think are so good. First and foremost, the question, wow, I mostly get people who are like fair, fat, and 40 or something. So I think it was roughly that wording. Talk about a catchy opener. Immediately I'm intrigued. I'm like, who's asking this question? Like, what context is this happening in? So, super creative, funny way to draw the reader in. And it's cool to start with this moment of like where you're not at your best and then how you learn from it. I think you did it well without it being poor me. It was, you made it very clear that you brought that like problem solving approach rather than like poor me and here's how I overcame it. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, this is what I learned about myself from this experience. And so I feel like your personality and how you approach things really comes through. And then the second thing is, I feel like there's two things I walked away with if I was reading this essay. One, it is so clear how you're going to contribute to the HBS community. You say it very clearly at the end, but even before you got to it, it's like, as you're talking about your accomplishments and your drive and just your thought process, I want to get to C, so I'm going to do A to get to B to get to C. I feel like that level of thought process and the kinds of questions you were asking yourself and the way that you built up that skill development, all of those are things that if you're an admin, if you're someone who's doing admit for business school, you're looking for what can they contribute to a classroom. And I feel like that mindset is like a great thing to contribute, that questioning and coming up with logical reasoning. And you also very clearly and with humility lay out what you accomplished in a short amount of time and what the skill sets were. And it wasn't, I'm a problem solver, and just saying I'm a problem solver in different ways. It was showing you're a problem solver, right? It's like the showing, not the telling. And I think you did a wonderful job of that.
And I think like the advice that I've given to people when they're asking about their essays, I do think of, and what's funny is we ultimately learned it, again, I keep referencing the ALD class, but it's these crucible moments where like they call it a crucible, but it's like a hard time in your life and like what you learned from that and like how that ties into, it's like a common thread of like, like that happened. So then I did like XYZ and now I'm here. To your point, it's like, the A to the B. But yeah, no, I think it's like, what did you learn from, and actually I think I had, it's not like I sat down and immediately like put pen to paper on this. Like
yeah, tell us about your process. I was just about to
ask. Yeah. So I downloaded the like sample HBS essay guide, read some analyses of like what was working in those essays. And one of the advice that someone did give was like, think about like the hard times that you've had in your life and like what you learned from it. And like how that then ties back to like what you want to do. And so I was actually in Ecuador on that reverse exchange program, sitting in my hotel room. And I was like, oh yeah, like, duh, like, or I knew I wanted to like write it about food, but it's like, what's like a good, or, like, how do I tie that into like something that, like was like a learning experience. And it was just like one of those like epiphanies, like, oh my God, of course. Like, cause like in the grand scheme of things, gallbladder surgery, it like, the surgeon was with me for 20 minutes. This is not like, yes, technically it's a major surgery, but like, it's really, not from that perspective. So in a lot of ways, like when you're rewriting your own history, you're like, oh yeah, they're like, I'm a pretty like, happy, easygoing person. So I'm like, oh, like I've never really like struggled in my life. But then when you actually like sit down and you're like, no, what were like really tough times in my life, then it's like you like come to this. But yeah, so I think in general, like, yes, business schools like to see like you overcoming adversity and learning from it. But I think they also want you to, and my sister told me this too. She's like, they want people who were intentional with their decisions.
Yep.
And so it's like, yeah, like maybe you weren't actually thinking each one of those through, but then as you like look back, you're like, oh no, actually this did all make sense. And like at the time, maybe you were following your gut, but retrospectively you can be like, oh yeah, no, I mean, like my gut, I followed my gut and my gut was right because that was clearly like, what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah. I feel like either, you could read it one of two ways. Either you knew exactly what you wanted to do and followed through, or you just exhibited really good judgment at each step of the way based and like, and we're in touch with what you thought was the right move and followed through on it. Tell me a little more. You mentioned that this kind of came to you like an aha, but how long did it take you to write this from first sitting down and thinking about the topic to hitting publish or hitting like say that as VF?
I started writing in July and then I submitted in September. I wanted to start my essay earlier, but frankly, I had to take the GMAT 3 times before being able to, and even so yeah, I had my first GMAT test scheduled first week of July and I got a 630 and like bombed the math part. And I knew it in the moment, like as I was taking it, I was like, oh crap, this is going to be like a waste of time because
that's the worst feeling.
It's a horrible feeling because the answers or the questions were getting easier and you like, know, that's a bad sign. And so I had originally planned like, okay, I'll study for my GMAT until July, and then I'll have all of July and August to write my essay. But then when I bombed that part of the GMAT, I was like, okay, I still have to start writing my essay, but I also have to keep studying for the GMAT.
Oh, Jesus.
And unfortunately, like still the last time I took the GMAT was like the day before I had to submit, and thank God it was a 710, and I was like, you know what, it's good enough.
Holy crap. I didn't realize it was like that down to the wire. I had to take it 3 times too, but it's like, it's just an awful feeling if you haven't taken it yet, because you sit there and you know your score at the end. So you've just put in 4 hours of work on top of however long you've studied, and you hit submit and you see if you're good enough or not. And you kind of know pretty quickly, oh, it's just the worst.
Yes, a horrible feeling. I did submit the 630 just to show that because my reading score was higher on that. So I was like, well, I don't think schools actually super score, but if you did super score, I think I would have been 730. So I was like, okay, I'll include that. I also did better at the writing, because the essay part, by the third time I took it, I was like, I'm so over this. But yeah, so anyway, the number of drafts, definitely double digits, probably close to 20. Ooh. I did not use an MBA consultant, but I used my sister she was at MIT Sloan at the time. So she had obviously successfully gotten in there. She had gotten to the interview point of HBS. So clearly, at least, her essay wasn't like glaringly wrong, I would assume. So she was helpful. And then my friend, who was my roommate at the time as well, she was also applying to business school. So the both of us looked over each other's stuff. And then I had a friend who was an English major, who did all of the grammatical proofing for me. And then I had a couple of people read it just to gut check. And so Julia, your reaction of like, oh, this is like very authentically you. When my friends said that, I was like, okay, yep, like I'm on the right path. I just need to like narrow it down. And I will say, like, my essay is longer than what they advise. I think they advise around 1,000. Does that sound right?
It sounds right.
I think mine's like 1,500 or something. So it is on the longer side. And of course, the first draft was like 2,500 words. So it was a lot of like making sure each sentence is useful. And the process, I feel like getting it from the 13th draft to the 19th draft was tougher almost, because you're like, you have to like take, like, just cut words, or like how can you use it's for sure like a stretch on your writing abilities, because frankly in the workplace, like, yes, you write emails, and yes, it's for sure good to be succinct there, but it's harder because it's almost like it's more storytelling, but at the same time trying to be as concise as you would email your boss.
Well, it's also like you feel like this is your shot to say, like, this is who I am, and so you don't want to miss anything that's important. Yes. And it starts to be like, when it starts to be this really clear picture of who you are, then it's like each part that you have to take out is like you deprioritizing and saying that part's less important. And it's it's a weird self-edit moment.
For sure.
And you wrote this one specifically for HBS. Tell me a little bit more about your broader application strategy. How many schools did you apply to? How similar was this essay?
So I wanted to apply first round to HBS. I knew from, back, sophomore year of college, that being my dream school. And then MIT was on my list because they're really great for entrepreneurship. My sister was there. She was loving it. She thought the people were really down to earth, which was for sure important to me as well. And ultimately just landed on those two. I thought about applying to Stanford and Haas. Frankly, like, all of the people before me, or I should say in the years before me at Wayfair who got into HBS, none of them even got an interview at Stanford. So part of it was just like, what will I actually even get an interview at Stanford? Two, like, would I actually want to like uproot my life and move to the West Coast? And at the time, I was dating my now husband. My sister's nearby. My parents are 3 hours away. Like, it does, like, yes, you can argue it both ways. Like, on the one hand, when you don't really have any not commitments. What's the word I'm looking, or like basically like, you know,
Ties.
ties, or yeah, like, you know, my now husband, Rob, like, yes, he was for sure, mobile. Like, yes, he could also move to the West Coast if needed, like that type of thing. Like children aren't in the picture, like, things like that. It for sure would have been an easier time, to go versus like 10 years from now. But yeah, no, I mean, I had friends who were in San Francisco, and uh I just, every time I went out there, it felt so tech focused, which is good, absolutely. And food tech for sure is like blowing up right now, and so you could for sure like marry it with food. But I felt like at like on the East Coast, it didn't have to quite be, or like on the East Coast, you see way more of the like consumer facing brands, and like, you know, all of the new retail brands, and people selling or doing CPG in different ways. And I felt like that was probably a, like, I don't know, better fit. But yeah, frankly, like a lot of it was personal to only apply to Boston-based schools.
Yeah, well, it worked out, and I'm glad you didn't apply, because you probably would have got in, and then I wouldn't have met you. So Rob and I both win in this instance. No, that's awesome. Is there anything, looking back, either at this essay specifically or in general, that you would do differently in applying it? Obviously, like, you know, it all worked out, so it's harder to see those changes, but what would you have done differently?
I for sure would have listened to the advice of people being like, you won't actually study for the GMAT unless you book a test time. And so I should have booked a test time back in March, you know, like, and like gotten that out of the way. So I wasn't doing both GMAT and essay studying. And sure enough, like, yeah, on the weekends, I'd be like, oh yeah, let me do a couple hours of studying for the GMAT. And that was like starting in January. And then sure enough, when I actually booked the first test time in July, then it was like every night I am doing like practice questions. And you just really don't take it that seriously unless you have like a looming deadline.
Book the damn test. No,
yeah,
amazing.
Book the damn test. If you're, you know, 2 years from writing your essay, as in like from applying, but you have like the flexibility now to take the GMAT, it
book
does last
the damn
for 5
test.
years. Yeah.
That's the message. Book the damn test.
Yeah.
It took me 2 years and 3 attempts too. So I fully understand. And yeah, and thankfully I finished it and then could go to the essays part, but I can't imagine doing both at once, is just with the timelines looming, that's stressful.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely not great, but
it all worked out. So
it all worked out.
I have 2 more questions before we jump to rapid fire. So first, on the topic of like, while you were at school, you know, I don't know how to put it except more simply, like, was it worth it? Are you glad that you went? What do you feel like you got out of it at a high level?
I'm for sure very glad I went. I mean, just like personally, great friendships, for sure. Yeah, exactly. Especially this lady, Julia. And I think all of the, again, keep coming back to ALD, but, you know, obviously I love, like, as I said, digging in, getting to the root of things. And I do feel like HBS, and I think business school in general would have been helpful, but HBS was really good about understanding my motivations for entrepreneurship specifically. So some people want to be, or, you know, like some people want to be, you know, that famous billionaire, you know, Bezos level, like, and kudos to them. I really just wanted to be my own boss. And I think what's really helpful and like, I wanted to be at the decision-making table. And what's really helpful about that is also realizing the reality of venture capital backed companies. And I work at one now. But the reality is the board and your investors become your boss. Mm-hmm. And so it really made me realize if I can avoid it, I don't want a venture backed company. Like, I want I would want to build a business that, I'm very strategic about like the cash flow of the business and like how much, or, like how can I do something where I first get money from the customers and then have to pay my suppliers, like literally like think like having all of these restrictions of like, I want to be my own boss, but I want to do it in a way that's like, or, like ultimately, if you end up owning as the founder 20% of the company, you don't get to make the final calls. And, I see it, my brother-in-law, like he worked at Wayfair for a long time and overlapped with myself. And the Wayfair founders still own the majority stake of the company. So ultimately they can tell the board, they can tell the stock market to like, frankly, F off.
God, that must feel so good.
I know, right?
Like,
and then,
no.
And then my brother-in-law went to Stitch Fix, which, I think the original founder probably at this point, or for sure owns less than 20% of the company. And ultimately, like they had to keep making decisions. They're a public company. They had to keep making decisions based on their stakeholders. And so that like, there goes the idea of being my own boss, even though, that's like a company that, I don't know what it is now, but at the time was for sure valued at over $1 billion, like absolutely a successful company. But at the end of the day, like you don't become the boss, or, you're not the boss.
No, I love that. I feel like that's like, it's refreshing because you're so clear on what you wanted. You certainly, wanted to work somewhere where you could be comfortable and have nice things and all those things. But I liked your line about like, I don't need to be Jeff Bezos. I want autonomy and I want to feel like I can make those kinds of decisions. So that's awesome. Last question for you. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now, because you've teased that like, all the way through, you've kind of stuck to your mission. What are you up to now? And what do you want to do next?
So right out of school, I joined at the time, 10-person food tech startup. It's called Foodberry, and it wraps up wholesome foods into snackable formats. So by replicating the technology of a fruit skin. So like the way that an orange peel protects the inside orange, we can create food forms that, sound like they're almost imaginary in a way, like a ball of hummus wrapped in a red pepper puree skin that's poppable, portable, and more sustainable, requiring a lot less plastic packaging, if any at all.
God, it is so good. I've had some of them.
Yeah. So making, healthy, wholesome foods more accessible and like easier, or like to fit into consumers' lives, kind of going back to that whole bit in my essay about consumer behavior. It's like, if given all the time in the world, I think a lot of people for sure would choose to eat like, hummus and a cut up red pepper if possible. But frankly, like, you're running out the door in the morning and you don't have time to pack it, or you'll be gone all day. And, it's something that needs to be refrigerated or things like that. It's like, it is hard to eat healthy. And so it's like, how can you make healthy foods fit into a consumer's lifestyle and help the planet at the same time, and like not have to, because currently convenient formats require single-use plastic. And
a lot of them aren't actually healthy, right? Like they just like abuse and use those labels.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Although they also make ice cream balls that maybe aren't as like quote unquote healthy, but are so decadent.
Healthier relative to other ice cream.
Wait,
options.
like tell us some of the flavors. Cause it felt like when you were describing it to me, I felt like I was like going to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory of just imaginary like delights.
Yes. So the ice cream product specifically that Julia's referencing, it's similar to mochi. But it's like chocolate brownie ice cream wrapped in like a raspberry fresh fruit puree on the outside. So it's like decadent, like a truffle. But we also have like elderberry, lemon, wellness berries that like are a boost of immunity, and a lot of cool different options in our portfolio. But and like I should say what my actual role is. So I was the first business hire, which can be risky at a tech companies, sometimes they, it depends on the team if they actually value like business opinions or they think you're just an annoying like necessity. Luckily, it seems like they actually did value my skill set. And so technically my title is head of business planning and marketing, but really it's a catch-all business function, like just head of business, essentially, like everything from, finance and accounting to marketing to even I've done graphic design for the company, and project management, using my TOM skills, our operations management class, first year, like figuring out, bottlenecks in the production line and like if we can solve those, like what that means in our capacity and things like that. But so it's been great. I've been able to see a lot more of, beyond just marketing. I've been able to see like all aspects of the business. Right now we're trying to raise money. So, putting together the investor deck, and it reaffirms the fact that, I don't want to have this like, I don't want to be doing hundreds of slides for investors to prove to, like, frankly, it feels like a waste of time in terms of, wouldn't you rather want the CEO you're investing in to be working on building the business rather than like convincing you that they have a good business?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think what you just said is so interesting because I think sometimes people hear about like people wanting to go to business school who want to go become entrepreneurs. And I've heard said back to those people is like, well, just go, why wait? Why don't you can just go start it, just go do your thing. And I think that is a perfectly viable path. But I also think if you just listen to what Alex said about, she took all of the classes, her finance, her accounting, her operations class, and is directly using them, 18 months out of school, like all of those skills. And for an entrepreneur where you have to have that tool belt and like be able to reach into any of those different skill sets, to have gotten this 2-year download, she's a huge asset to this company. And sure, you can go do it on your own and learn it on the fly, but this is a way to have the connections. I forget what your phrase was, is like the drive,
it's
and
hustle and who you know,
hustle who you know, but also the know-how, right? Like which you can learn on the job. But you're probably faster and more effective than had you tried to learn it on the job.
Yes. Yeah. And I do feel like, it all comes down to the person. Like financial security was important to me, which is also, I mean, frankly, a lot of professors were like, well, if financial security is what you're after, like entrepreneurship might not be for you. But the thing is, like, I think what will frankly happen is like, I'll build a side hustle on the side as, I work a full-time job that I still am learning a lot and like enjoying what I do. And, like build a side hustle in like a very, maybe like slow, but methodical way that like doesn't require me to have an income of zero and, take, or like, again, that's speaking from like personally, financial security is, was something that was like a, like big focus growing up in my household. And so it's like ingrained in me that it's like, okay, no, like financial security is important. And I want the financial upside of being an entrepreneur. And so I'll just do it in a way that works for me and like be frankly honest with myself of like, what am I willing to do? Or, how can I structure this in a way that builds the life that I want?
Yeah. No, 100%. And I know I said that was going to be my last question, but it brings up something I think unique to your situation that is totally worth touching on, which is like the role of a dual career relationship. And like Alex is talking about sort of this element of financial security and finding that kind of balance. And you just got married. We both just got married recently to our respective husbands. And I don't know if you feel this way, Alex, but I feel like having a partner certainly means you have to make sacrifices and trade-offs. And that's what gets focused on a lot when you hear about dual career relationships. But I think it also means you can take turns about like who's going to take on more risk at what time. That way, your risk profile, if I have a very secure job right now, my husband, is taking on a more risky venture. How do you feel like that having a partner plays into your risk appetite.
Yeah, no, that is so true. My partner happens to be way more risk averse than I am. So, you know, I know that, or like, but at the same time, he's not happy in his job. And so I'm actually pushing him to take more of a risk of like doing a more drastic career pivot, which might require some, or he's interested in the data analytics space. And so, that might require getting a certificate that frankly will cost money and, will suck up time to like do the classes for it and things like that. But, that's a risk that I feel like is worth taking given that, he's not happy with his current job, but fortunately his current job, or he's at a hedge fund and they've been doing very well with the market going down. It's hedge funds are like crazy in terms of how you can do so well when everyone else is doing so
I try not to think about it that hard.
Yeah. So I think he's fine regardless of, how bad this upcoming recession will be. But yeah, no, I think it's he fully knows and like supports, my dreams of being an entrepreneur. And but yeah, I think it's, frankly, like I want to be in a certain state of like financial stability when like children enter the picture. And so, like we're both willing to push out children for, multiple years to, get our careers and finances in the place that we actually want it to be.
Yeah. I have so many follow-up questions and discussions. I think we should, I'm going to parking lot this for a future discussion about, dual career relationships. There's so much you can talk about with MBA about like how having a relationship or not impact where you apply and the experience while you're there and what it means coming out of it. I think, the takeaway from this little tease about relationships and MBA is it's a lot more nuanced than dual career relationships mean sacrifice and they never work. There's a lot more to it. And so we'll have to unpack that further. And we both love talking about love. So we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it later on future
In
episodes.
another life, I could have, there's so many things. I could have been a diagnostic doctor like House or a marriage counselor.
You can just do it all.
I still could be a marriage counselor. Getting a MD at this stage, I don't think I want it.
And the MD's tough, but no, I look and I look at like, talk about career pivots. My mom started in investment banking and then went to work for the government. And then she ended up running a nonprofit. And then she went back to school to become a counselor. And she's still trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life, which I think is admirable and not a downfall. So it's cool to have that curiosity.
Absolutely.
All right. To end it off, let's do some rapid fire. So you came up with some of these, so you should know how they work. But just to reiterate, it's going to be super quick, as fast as you can, couple word answers. If we need to dive into some more and have some more exposition on it, we can, but let's try and keep it fast. All right. So first one, what interview question from HBS or another MBA program most took you by surprise?
What would you advise your CEO on in terms of multi-brand marketing? Like it was a question that was so specific to me and what I did. But I just like it. I just panicked and like my mind went blank when they asked it, because of course that's the question I should be able to like answer to the most, is like, I did all of this multi-brand marketing within Wayfair and like proved out that yes, it is valuable to have multiple brands, and yet like was stunned in the moment.
I love that. What stereotype about HBS is true?
There are for sure people that think they're God's gift to the world.
Yes.
Not all of them, not the majority, but yeah.
What stereotype about your school is not true?
That everyone is like that. Like, nice. I feel like, HBS has a reputation of like a bunch of rich assholes, but when I'm
poor. right now.
Yeah, I know.
I'm an asshole, but I'm broke.
You're definitely not an asshole. But yeah, when I went to accepted students weekend, I was like, that was the biggest thing. Like when I was accepted to MIT and HBS, I was like, okay, it'll cut, the people will be a big factor, because I was worried that HBS would be a bunch of assholes, but no.
Nice. Who was the coolest alumni or class guest you were most excited to see or meet?
I took the business of entertainment, media, and sports class, and we had Dwayne Wade, which was pretty awesome, come speak to our class. But then also Chip and Joanna Gaines were equally as awesome.
Oh, amazing. That's so cool. What's your most embarrassing moment at business school?
Ooh, probably, or like one of our section mates calling me out for sleeping during class after the day after the white party.
I missed that. That's amazing. That's epic. Would you describe yourself as more analytical or creative?
Creative.
Introvert or extrovert?
Introvert who presents extrovert.
Cautious or bold?
Bold?
You can't say bold with a question mark. You're bold. You're bold. You're absolutely bold. You're bold, but like wrapped in a humility that makes it unassuming. But you're sneaky bold.
Yeah, like not impulse driven either, but it's like bold in terms of like, yeah, when I make a decision, I'm going with it and like not looking back.
I love that. If you had to sort HBS as a business school into a Hogwarts house, what house would it be?
Gryffindor.
If you had to sort yourself.
Is that lame?
No, it's not.
It's more like they get all the glory. And that's absolutely,
yeah. Sometimes undeservedly, because they're like,
exactly.
By all the others. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, agree. Yeah.
Agree. If you had to sort yourself into a Hogwarts house,
either Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff.
You're a Ravenclaw. Give me a break. Don't give me that.
Hey, Hufflepuffs are good people.
They are, but whatever. I won't get into it. I don't want to piss off our Harry Potter listeners. When you're asked in a formal setting, like a job interview, what do you say your biggest weakness is?
Actually lately I've been saying it's my tendency to ramble, which is literally exactly what I'm doing now. But basically like being able to succinctly voice over like my thoughts and opinions. On paper, I'm good. Like on the spot, not so hot.
I disagree, but that's fine. What do you think that's actually your biggest weakness, or do you just say that's your biggest weakness?
No, I say that. I think it's ultimately, I think people pleasing is a double-edged sword. It makes you really good achiever in terms of like wanting to please your bosses.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, if you're working cross-functional, it ends up resulting in you saying yes to too many things and being really or stretched very thinly. Which I've also said like that in the past too, but I don't know if I've ever explicitly said people pleaser, but it's like, it's the truth.
No, that's a great, that's a relatable answer. Is there anything you regret about your business school experience?
I mean, it for sure sucked being there for COVID. I think what I was most bummed about missing out on was the international study trip to Rwanda that I was supposed to go on. I really wanted to see those mountain gorillas. And I wanted to go on a safari and just thought it would be a really cool experience to like work or like learn about business in Africa, because frankly, I know very little.
Yeah, no, agree. Getting travel less thinking about it. Last but not least, if you had to pick a new mascot for HBS, what would it be?
Ooh, given that our mascot is a color, there's a lot I could choose from. I think, is it lame if I say owl? Like, I feel like
No, I like
owls
that.
are like really good for wisdom. They have like a lot more positive meaning beyond just wisdom too. So I think that'd be
But
cool.
they're also like, well, I don't know if they're carnivores, but they're not like totally docile either. Right.
Yeah.
They go
Yeah.
after like, they're carnivores. They eat little mice meat.
Yeah.
And not to say that
And
we're
they're creepy
carnivores.
that they can like turn their head 360 degrees
And
around. Like
now
they're
that
always watching.
they're always watching, that reminds me of like if someone's sitting in a class and makes a comment, all the heads swivel.
Yeah.
I think an owl is
Yeah.
like the perfect mascot.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, thank you so much. It was just a joy and a delight to get to talk to you and hear and learn more about you. And I think the audience will take away, the couple things I've taken away from this, which is some really solid tips on writing the essay. Be genuine. And I know that sounds easy to do, but like listen back on how Alex thought about her process and the number of people she had sort of gut check who know her well and make sure it was, authentic to who she was, asking questions about what you really want to do and what the baby steps in between are to get there and how that builds to what you really want to do and be. And finally, I think if anything, this interview should give listeners a picture into like the kinds of people you meet at school, which are incredibly humble, very driven. You can be driven and humble at the same time. And I think Alex is a picture perfect version of what that looks like. And you can be driven without being like Elon Musk type. You can be driven towards your own specific version of a goal. And Alex definitely embodies all of that. So we loved having you on the pod to interview, and we'll be excited to interview another guest shortly. But thank you, Alex.
Yes. And thank you so much for interviewing me and pumping my tires. Julia, you're always really good at words of affirmation.
It's my love language.
Yes, I can tell. But no, yes, thanks for complimenting me, but also asking really good questions. And it was very enjoyable to be on this end of the podcast.
Amazing. All right. Well, we will see you soon. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.